What a way to bring up 400 Grand Prix. Max Verstappen, simply lovely. Done it again. Joining me as always, G. How you going, man? What do you think of the weekend overall? And what do you think of the race, man?
Yeah, good weekend overall. Plenty of action. I mean, look, we got a lot of excitement over qualifying. The race itself was pretty decent, and I think a lot of us expected a procession, but it wasn't a bad one. Not the best, but not a bad one.
Yeah, I mean, with, the virtual safety car and then the safety car, definitely spiced the race up, which it would have needed. Because I think if it had stayed green the whole way, it probably would have been a bit of a procession there in the end. Max Verstappen, man, impeccable as always. That moving to turn one, driving away like he did, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, look, it was a flawless performance. It's what we expect from Max. I mean, he's done it again. Last night he was on iRacing at the Nürburgring 24 hour, and then following day wins a race, and again flawless. He's a guy out there. He can eke so much out of that Red Bull. If you look at Red Bull in a whole, Yuki, look, qualifying crash, big one. Happy that he walked away from that one. One side of the garage is doing what they normally do, and that's Max. Yuki still has a lot to prove.
That's four in a row now at Imola for Max. Like you said, Yuki's crash, that was probably one of the biggest ones we've seen probably since Silverstone. Pressure's it's got to be starting to bubble away now. And I mean, you've got someone like Hadjar who's just having weekends like he's having, doing an impeccable job. Yes, he had an off, but bounced back, had a stonking race, man. He did what he needed to do. He helped Max, helped him, kept a lot of the faster guys behind him so Max could eke out that first stint.
Yeah, he's doing all the right things, the kid. And speaking of helping Max, Yuki was told to help Max Edger in the race and help keep Piastri behind, and probably could have done a little bit better in that situation. But I mean, look, Yuki did relatively well. Like, he bounced back,
Yeah.
P20 to P10, picked up a solitary point. But yeah, again, Red Bull's not happy with that. They expect him to be, if Max, like we've talked about, Max finishes first, he's got to be in the mix to be taking away points from Max's rivals.
Yeah.
Okay,
He's got to be in
so
that top five, right? At least.
exactly at this point, six,
Yeah.
seven. I mean, how many races has he had now? Is his fourth weekend, I believe, with Red Bull?
Yeah.
Came
So
in from week 3,
Yeah.
round 7 now. Um, Despite Marco coming out publicly with a lot of support, I don't know. After this weekend, it's just like it feels like a big step backwards, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I feel like the merry-go-round is still turning for Red Bull. You know, Lindblad's killing it in F2 at
Yeah,
the moment.
yeah, podium over the weekend.
So, I feel like if Yuki doesn't pick it up by the summer break, and Hadjar keeps doing what he's doing, oh man, it's going to be tough for Red Bull to ignore Hadjar. And I mean, on the flip side too, like we saw Yuki picked up that solitary point, but after Friday, Red Bull found something. They seem to have unlocked something.
Yeah, I mean, the engineers did a great job, right? I mean, Friday, I was thinking, this thing is an absolute handful. Come Saturday, come qualifying, they were there, right? They were on it. So it seems to be a little bit of a habit this year where practice, the Friday sessions are just not at that point where we would consider Red Bull to be generally. But, come Saturday, they put it together, and then Sunday, you have a driver like Max, anything's possible.
You can't say anything more than flawless. Typical Red Bull. Yeah, ordinary Friday, you saw Max showing his frustration, whacking the steering wheel.
Yep.
And then overnight, they managed to tune her up. And it seems like they found something like McLaren didn't have an answer for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a hard one to know. I mean, if Piastri nailed the start today, do you think he sailed off into the sunset?
I don't think he would have, eh? I think Max would have kept him real honest. I think it would have been a lot closer than, say, somewhere like Miami, and then you look at Oscar, probably caught napping, man, going into turn one. He was probably more focused on what Russell was doing.
He was rapid, wasn't he, George? He got a great start. But yeah, I mean, he was first to admit he broke early. He got into turn one hit the brakes way too early. So we've talked about Oscar and how he's been pretty flawless and doesn't really make a mistake. And unfortunately, he's made one this weekend. But on a whole, I think P3 isn't a bad result, considering he sort of got caught up with a bit of a bad strategy, coming in early and then getting held up by a lot of traffic. I think he can walk away relatively happy with P3.
Yeah, I mean, he just didn't have the tyres under him at the end there. Made his stop relatively early, and then punched his way back through the field pretty good. He made some pretty punchy moves there. He kept himself in the race, but I kind of just feel like maybe Lando managed his tyres a little bit better, and then it was nice to see a little bit of a battle between those two at the end. Obviously, it's a shame Oscar didn't have the rubber underneath him to mount a good challenge. Consolidation of points for
Yeah.
Oscar, and over 24 races, that's what you need to do when the races don't fall your way. You need to still pick up a healthy bag of points.
He's still leading the championship, 146 points. Norris sitting back at 133 now. They go into every weekend now.
That's favourite.
They're on the podium,
Yeah.
right? At some point, I think during the season, we're going to see it coming together.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
The popcorn moment is going to happen. But, I was impressed with Lando. Again, sloppy Saturday. Not stringing it together during qualifying. He's making a bit of a habit of that. But, again, maximising the Sunday.
Yeah, and especially being in the best car, you have to be on the podium. Hypothetically, we look ahead to next weekend and he qualifies in fourth or fifth. It could be a lot worse. And Oscar's on pole. It could be a lot worse. So
Yeah, you're not really going to get that leeway at Monaco. But yeah, completely right. You just got to maximise Saturday. You really do. It's just so important now.
And what about Mercedes, man? What'd you make of their weekend?
When you look at both sides of the garage, there was quite a discrepancy between Russell and Kimi. Perhaps, Kimi, hometown race, maybe a little bit of pressure on him this weekend and, things didn't really fall his way. He'll be pretty disappointed. Obviously, a DNF during the race through a mechanical failure, but I think Russell will probably be the most disappointed because P3 qualifying and then P7 in the race, probably his worst outing, right, for this year?
Yeah, so I think that's the first time he's finished outside the top five, even in the sprint races. He did come out and say he was struggling with the rear end in the race, and that hurt the tyres. Unfortunate for Kimi, like you said, the occasion maybe got to him a little bit, but I think in the end it was a throttle that led to his DNF, a throttle issue. Came out and said, he's sort of struggling to understand how to work the tyres. When the track's cool, he seems to be able to get the most out of them. On a warmer day like we saw today, he said he's struggling a little bit. So yeah, an interesting one. They had they were quite upbeat about the upgrade package that they were bringing, and it just didn't work out for them this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be looking to bounce back in Monaco. But yeah, probably one of the top teams at least, that walks away this week. Disappointed.
Yep.
But speaking of a team that, for me, was the overachiever for the race, Team Red.
Let's go. So Lewis, man, crushed it. Race pace, man. That car was probably one of the quickest cars behind. Well, it was the quickest car behind the Red Bull and McLaren, which was nice to see. They're still struggling with the rear end of that car. That's their biggest issue. And hopefully come Barcelona, I think they're going to bring a suspension upgrade, rear suspension. So hopefully that fixes the problem. But yeah, just Saturday, man. It's just they don't have that one lap pace at the moment.
Yeah, well, after Saturday, I thought The best they're probably going to get for Sunday was perhaps maybe a P8, P9, somewhere
Yeah,
around
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, they were in the mix, and it was just good to see, particularly Lewis, racy. And I think it was probably the best race he's had this year in the Ferrari. I mean, look, we know he's had the win with the sprint race in China, and he's picked up another podium in Miami. But I think this was one of his better showings, and it was just good to see him have a smile on his face, even like the whole weekend. Perhaps maybe with the home crowd there, there's,
Putting on a face.
putting on a show. But I think he's accepted the challenge now. I think we saw him excited at the start of the season. The car really hasn't been there. It's just been this downward sort of spiral to the bottom for Lewis.
Yeah.
And I just feel like he's sort of come to terms with, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to go. I'm taking this challenge on. So it's good to see.
A little bit unlucky for Charles there in the end. Ferrari probably taking the safer option to give the place back to Albon. As the rules are written, which have now been changed by the drivers, you need to have that. The overtaking car needs to have his front tyre up to the wing mirror of the car he's overtaking at the apex of the corner, which he didn't do. So technically, you could say he should have been all right. But, Ferrari found out they were under investigation, so they played the safe option. Obviously, with the field being so close, he would have ended up maybe 9th or 10th if he got like a 5-second penalty.
Yeah.
So it was probably a smart play there by Ferrari.
Yeah, Leclerc was clearly annoyed by it all, but I think Ferrari are looking at it from the perspective of, hey, look, we're picking up a 4th and 6th today.
Yeah.
Yesterday, just 24 hours ago,
We weren't
that
even...
just did not look like that was going to be on the cards, right?
Yeah.
So playing that safer option, giving the position back, guaranteeing essentially that P6 for Leclerc was a win in their eyes, considering Saturday's performance.
There's still a lot of work to do on one lap pace. They've shown they've got pretty decent race pace.
Yeah, I think the Ferrari fans today walk away a lot happier than what they were on Saturday. Now on to Williams. Double points, we predicted it. We got that one right because my predictions, I think overall, were pretty damn terrible. Williams, double points. They're not the surprise packet of the season anymore. I think, they're there or thereabouts as being the best of the rest. And you talked about them overtaking Ferrari. They're not far off. I think they'll be happy with that. A few little moments over the weekend that they'll take a lot of pride in. I mean, Carlos Sainz took Q2, Q1, Q2. He was the fastest.
Yeah, I think it might
I'm
have
sure
been.
it was in qualifying, right?
Yeah, it was in qualifying. Yeah.
Yeah, so showed glimpses of pace, and yeah, I think they're tracking really well.
Yeah, and what's impressive with Williams is they haven't brought any upgrades to that car. So that car is what it was.
Nothing major that we know of, right?
Yeah, as it was basically at the start of the season. So the performance that they're finding it with what they've got. They haven't brought anything that a magic cure. Like they're genuinely understanding their car, which only makes it even scarier when they do bring an upgrade.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, we've talked about it a lot, that they're potentially one of the teams that pulls like that McLaren of 2024, right? Where they just start bringing these upgrades and they start eking out even more and more performance. Look, they've got a great driver lineup this year, finally. Albon's doing a great job. We've talked about it. We thought he would crack under the pressure of having a great teammate. Williams, I think, just over the course of this year is only going to get stronger and, may nab a few podiums.
Yeah, definitely. Albon on pure pace, if you take the safety cars and the virtual safety car out of it, I mean, he was probably genuinely fighting for a podium.
Yeah, I mean, he was there or thereabouts. Hey, he was in the mix. So
Yeah.
it just bodes well for Williams. They've produced a car this year that is clearly competitive. James Vowles over there at Williams is doing a top job.
Yeah, man, he's building that team nicely. He's even said, we're full focus on 2026. We're trying to understand this year's car. That's cool, but he wants to have a real crack at 2026. And I think, if, you know, if they keep humming along like they are, there's no reason come next year they could surprise a few people. I mean, they're surprising us already, but I mean, they could take an even bigger step.
Personally, I'd love to see it back. I'd love to see them back being race winners. When was their last race winner? I mean, they got a little bit lucky with Maldonado, I think, in 2012 with the race win. Yeah, had a pretty competitive car in the early 2000s, but I'd just love to see Williams back in the mix. I mean, we've got McLaren now back.
Yeah.
Get Williams back, get Ferrari back up there, and just some of the old traditional teams, just
Yeah. Yeah.
just go back to the old liveries as well. All right, let's move on to Racing Bulls. Now, I'm disappointed. Lawson didn't get the point that I was, predicting. Hadjar, great weekend. I think he will leave. Look, he P9 in the race. Good couple of points picked up, but I still think he'll be pretty disappointed walking away with a P9 because I think there was a little bit more in the bag there today.
Weekend overall. Again, like we said, man, like he's putting himself in the shop window for that Red Bull seat.
Yeah.
He can't be doing any more. And he had that little off, but bounce back to
Yeah.
have a
That's
solid
the key.
qualifying, right?
Yeah.
So he's showing he's got the mental toughness, which I think is what Red Bull are looking for. Lawson, man, it's just not still not falling the right way for him. With Colapinto's incident, which we'll get into a little bit later. And then in the race, he was stuck, man. He was stuck with guys on the same age tires, basically the same strategy, and then they were just pumping out basically exactly the same lap times.
Yeah.
So he was just stuck. He couldn't do anything. Probably strategy didn't help him bringing him in early.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just still just not falling for him.
Like, pace wise, I don't think he's far off, but he just needs some luck on Saturday.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? He just
Yeah.
needs a little bit of luck. And, it was a little bit of a double edged sword on Saturday because, on one hand, you say, well, if, that first lap he put in, if it was a little bit quicker, a little bit cleaner, he would have been fine. Then he wouldn't have to rely on that second lap to get himself through, which he was relying on. But then obviously the red flag came out with Colapinto's incident, which obviously scuttled that. So, he just needs a little bit going his way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, at least he brought the car home in one piece. Didn't sort of get tangled up in any real dramas. It was a pretty quiet race.
Yeah, from the racing side, it was clean at least because he did have an off, very similar to Hadjar's, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Where he just basically spun it and just flat spotted those mediums. Was that in practice or was that in quali? No, I'm pretty sure it was practice.
It was practice, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but otherwise, I think he can walk away relatively happy that it was a clean weekend because we did say that he needed a clean weekend. But unfortunately, as we just discussed, needs a little bit of luck on Saturday and hopefully gets an opportunity for a little bit of redemption. Now, we talked about Ferrari having, okay, it was a mixed weekend overall because of Saturday, but from a race perspective, they had an excellent race and overachieved. But poor old Aston Martin flipped the switch, right? We thought there were some points in the bag, particularly for Alonso. We thought he'd get out of the Donut Club. What happened there? Like, what went on?
Yeah, man. After Saturday, I thought, ooh, this could be good. This could be good. And, I think they were one of the only teams to qualify on the mediums as well. So that car on the medium tyre definitely found something. I don't know whether they were sandbagging in practice, but they certainly turned it on in qualifying. And then in the race, it just, again, race sort of didn't fall their way. Probably not the greatest strategy for Alonso. And he definitely made his feelings known being the unluckiest driver on the grid,
Yeah.
or in the world, sorry. And then it just sort of seemed like on the hard when they did eventually switch onto the hard tire, they just fell away. They just didn't have anything on that hard tire.
Yeah. It was just a terrible strategy overall from Aston. And I think they just really walk away knowing that they've just left a good bag of points on the table. But it could be a bit of a bittersweet weekend because, they did bring some upgrades. They turned that car on. So perhaps this is the start of a little bit of a resurgence for Aston Martin in 2025. So, maybe this is the turn that they needed.
Yeah, they definitely unlocked some performance there with the upgrades. I guess we'll wait and see how they go next week and then into Barcelona. I think after Barcelona, then like a lot of teams, will start to get a true read of where they're at after the upgrades and if a lot of the upgrades have worked. Yeah, disappointing. I mean, he finished just under a second behind Yuki, so he was nearly there.
There were definitely points on the offering there, and yeah, they'll be bitterly disappointed. And yeah, it was good to see Fernando with a little bit of optimism though after Saturday's performance. There were a few questions thrown at him if Newey had played a part, and he was a little bit sheepish, giving too much away. But you could see that competitive sort of streak come across him like, yeah, I'm top 10 here. We've got some points on the board. And yeah, I think he'll just walk away bitterly disappointed. But let's hope that this wasn't just sort of
A circuit
isolated,
specific.
circuit specific or isolated incident, that they can actually continue some of this progression into Monaco and into Barcelona. Now, a team that will be, well, Briatore. Let's talk about Briatore. Does he walk away from this weekend a happy man with Alpine's performance,
No.
or even his own decision of bringing Colapinto back?
Oh, look, he'll wipe his hands with Colapinto. I think he's already done that. He backtracked on the whole supposedly 5 races to prove himself. Um, he said all he has to do is be quick, score points, and don't crash. He wasn't quick. He didn't score any points, and he crashed.
Yeah,
Now, the Aussie in me is like, get in there, because that's
yeah,
what you get for dropping doing. But at the same time, I feel for Colapinto because he just looked rusty, man. The
yeah,
whole from FP1 into today's race, he just looked rusty.
yeah,
You know, in the practice sessions, he's just getting in people's way, pushing pretty hard in qualifying and had a pretty decent off there. And then just sort of in the race, sort of didn't really work out for him again. On the other side of the garage, yeah, I think Gasly's got to be gutted, man. And, that term lap 1 incident with Charles, even though Charles didn't really do anything, it was just Gasly sort of just ran wide and then ran off into the gravel, which dropped him back down to 14th. Because if you look at Gasly's weekend overall, man, like he was solid, man. That car looked quick and it looked like they had solid race pace.
yeah. Hasn't really strung a lot of races together. Showing glimpses, of course. So yeah, he'll be pretty disappointed. He let something slip there because obviously, Imola's quite notorious for being a difficult track to overtake. So he was in the mix, and that mistake just ran him back to 14th, and then he was basically just locked in from that point forward. Colapinto, on the other hand, of course, I'm gutted that Doohan's not in the seat, but I wanted to see Colapinto do well, and we talked about he just needed a clean weekend. Didn't have to beat Gasly.
He's on the back foot hard now.
Yeah, going into Monaco, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, and you're going to a place that is a real confidence circuit. Like you need to be confident in what you're doing around there.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this weekend was probably even more important.
Yeah,
just
I
confidence wise,
Just needed a clean one. Didn't have to be putting down fast lap times. Just get through every session squeaky clean.
Yeah,
Fortunately, didn't do it.
they'll be gutted. I mean, they won't be happy. And I think Gasly probably should have been a P9 or P10
Yeah.
with the pace that he was showing in practice and then on his long runs as well. I felt like it was pretty decent.
But how about old Kick? Mate, I thought the Hulk was in for a point there.
Man,
I was getting a little excited for him, eh?
he was looking racy there on the medium tyre too.
And let's not forget, Bortoletto, out qualified Hulk, and he went Q. Did he go to Q3, or am I just like completely losing my mind? He went to Q2 at least.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Q2, of course. Yeah.
yeah, went to Q2. Yeah, well, Hulkenberg made the mistake in those last sequence of
Yes.
corners there
Yep.
on his fast lap. So they managed to find some performance this weekend, which I think they'll be relatively happy with. This weekend they look to have closed that gap to the midfield. They definitely outperformed someone like Haas, so they got to be happy with that.
Yeah. Well, Haas, they're just the pendulum team. The most inconsistent. When they're on, they're on. When they're off, they're absolutely dreadful. And Gene Haas was there this weekend, the owner, of course, and mate, like I mean, I think this year is an improvement overall, but yeah, they just got to get that inconsistency out of the car and just start finding some performances week after week because they were sort of like nowhere most of the weekend. Probably a little unlucky for Ollie Behrman in the qualifying session, but a little confusion there anyway, at least with Colapinto's red flag, and he thought he got across the line, etc. Before that was officially made, wasn't to be, and yeah, so basically that sort of locked him in down the back there. But yeah, not a lot to say for Haas this weekend.
They were a team that brought some upgrades, and those upgrades clearly didn't work. Shame for Ocon, he had the DNF. Behrman, he's probably struggled a little bit in qualifying anyway this season, I think. So
Well,
it
he's
was,
just been inconsistent, eh? Like
yeah,
he's had his moments, and we've talked about like we think he's shown plenty of speed at times.
yeah. Especially
Uh,
when it comes to racing. Like
yeah,
racing, I don't think's the issue. It's just trying to maybe extract a little bit more on the Saturday.
Pirelli obviously brought in the C6 tyre for today's race. First
Yep.
time that we've had that compound, softest of the soft. Successful. Did it work out the way they wanted it to? What are your thoughts on that one?
Uh, yeah, I feel like it did because it opened up the opportunity for different strategies, which is what we said in the preview was that's obviously what they were aiming for, and I think it kind of worked. As far as the C6, apart from Aston Martin, it was just a normal qualifying tyre. They were never going to use it in the race. It was way too soft. Even the medium tyre was probably too soft as a race tyre. So the hard tyre was obviously the optimal tyre to be on. But it definitely opened up a lot more opportunity for different strategies. Well, who was your driver of the day?
Well, if I'm looking at like just from overall, I mean Max was flawless, but I'm going to give it to Sir Lewis, and the reason being is that look, Saturday was pretty terrible, but he eked out I think everything he could from that car today, and I think he maximized what he could, and I think it was one of his best drives for Ferrari this season.
Yeah, 100%. Completely agree with that. Definitely one of his best drives. He just seemed to have the bit between his teeth. Especially when he got changed the tyres under the VSC. He had that VSC go his way. And then the safety car come out and switched him back onto a fresh set of hard tyres. Mate, he was, yeah, like we said, 1.4 or 1.5 seconds behind Oscar.
He was racy,
Yeah, yeah,
and it was good to see. It was good to see, and I think he'll walk away from that weekend happy, maximised what he could get out of it.
yeah. Yeah, they just got to sort out Saturday. That's their biggest thing. It's just Saturday. If they can, like, imagine if they started fourth or fifth, based on their pace, mate, they could have easily been on the podium. we'll have to wait and see. But before Barcelona, we have Monaco. So we'll be back in a couple of days to discuss the preview for Monaco. So until then, catch you in the next one. Laters.
Catch ya.